We're talking about payroll, brought to you by People Advisory, which we're not going to actually read an ad now, but our spokesperson, Miss Nikole Mackenzie of Momentum Accounting. Let's talk about payroll. Sons of CPAs bonus episode where Nix and Scott share small but useful piece of practical advice as it relates to running their professional accounting firms. Brought to you by the letter P, and it is payroll. So you can buy real estate in the meta. Is this for real?
Like, I think it's in the meta. I think it's in the meta or one of those
How come
things.
I'm not surprised though? Like that just seems normal to me now. Like this is what I watched in movies growing up. Like people would live in their digital world and pay for their digital clothes and their digital hats, and they're going to look cool like digitally. I said this on the episode yesterday. I think we are currently in the meta. I know we're not, like we're still going to be in the same room, but we're also like right now, sorry, let me contextualize. Everything we're doing is remote for our firm. We don't have an office anymore. We don't have as much in-person interaction with clients, but we're still interacting with all of them, and they're all over the world. I feel like we're in the meta. It's just 2D right now. It's just like 2D comics or 2D entertainment that somebody grew up seeing 2D entertainment like comics, and then they're watching shit on TV, you know?
Yeah, imagine if you could just buy a sick office in the metaverse and then everyone just goes, but you're actually at your house walking around, but you're there. You're like next to your coworker.
That's crazy.
That'd be sweet.
That's so cool. I'm excited for the metaverse, and I want to see what it entails for me entertainment wise. I think that's going to be fun as hell to like be in a TV show or be in a movie, like have it surround you. Wouldn't that be dope?
Oh, okay.
Like that's what I want to see. All right. So payroll. Let's talk about your experience. Talk to me about payroll. Why are we going to talk about payroll today, Nikole?
No, I was just thinking back. So I started Momentum about 5 years ago. When I first started Momentum, I wanted nothing to do with payroll. I was like, I want to do accounting. That's it. And one of our first clients was a tech startup, and I'd met this guy in my networking group that had a payroll company. And so they were like, yeah, we want to use this company Gusto. And at that time, I wasn't super familiar with Gusto, and I didn't want to manage payroll. So I was like, use this other guy, really great. He'll do your payroll for you. And it turned out to be this just like antiquated payroll system. Everything was it was like paper reports that we would have to get to book all the journal entries. So yeah, I realized real quick that payroll is a big part of what we do as accountants. And then over the next 5 years, it became, something that we would do if clients asked us to do. And then now it's okay. Now we're actually selling payroll services. So it's been a long journey from not wanting to do any payroll services to actually selling payroll services. And now we're getting to the point where it's like, okay, how do we price, package, sell, deliver?
It's a lucrative business to be in.
It can be if you do it
but
right.
Don't chase the dollar signs because the compliance is a bitch.
It's a pain in the ass, yes. And that's now that we have clients that are growing quickly, hiring everywhere, especially since after COVID, it's like we're just in compliance hell right now. And so we're at the point where we're just like rethinking the way that we deliver the services.
So we did after the fact payroll at our firm when I first started. And that was like 10 years ago. After the fact payroll, it is where client is giving you how much they paid the employee. You got to back into the taxes and shit. Or you have to calculate the taxes and tell them what they need to run. So they tell you their hours, you calculate it, you give them the amounts, and then on the back end, you're processing all the paperwork with the state and the federal. And we did that, and actually you make some good money doing it. You create the processes, you make it quick, you fill them out. I mean, I'm justifying it because there's offices that still do that in this world, in this country, maybe even listeners, people that are doing after the fact payroll. So
you would
I'm surprised you hadn't even heard of it. Yeah.
You would actually mail in tax forms.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Eventually we got to file them online. So have you ever filed anything online, like with the state sales tax? I'm sure you do sales tax.
Yeah. I mean, where we would go online to the state website.
And you pay the state sales
and
tax.
pay. Yeah.
California, yeah. So you've got to deal with that. Think about that times payroll, right? I had 5 different IRS logins. Like one was IRS fire system for 1099s and shit. So all of these things now are automated for us, which is great. Um,
I remember at my old firm, Ramona and I were together last night. We were just reminiscing when Gusto had the payroll, or not Gusto, but when Zero had the payroll product.
that was after the fact, right? That was pretty
Yeah,
much
I
after
don't
the
know what it
fact.
was, but I remember I had no idea what I was doing because I was in the tax department and then I moved over to the CAS department and we were running payroll and I had never run payroll before, right? And so
Hmm.
Zero, they would process and record the payroll, but then you actually had to pay it and we weren't paying it for a whole year. So the client got this
Dude,
tax notice. It was like $200,000 of payroll taxes. And they're like, weren't you paying it? I'm like, I don't know. So I had no idea what I was
if
doing.
yeah, I mean, oh God, we're dealing with it right now. We had somebody with 3 different companies, like they owe maybe 150,000, some crazy number. I don't even know, and haven't paid him. All of it was just in QuickBooks as a suggestion.
Yes.
Not really. I mean, I think they knew. And QuickBooks, we get QuickBooks clients that do that shit all the time. Like, and this one, they're gonna get ERC, and it's probably gonna negate what they owed in payroll taxes, which is crazy to me too. Like, that's a unique situation. But yeah,
Yeah. And I
talk
think
about payroll.
that's the concern there, right? It's the products that will calculate it for you and record it on your books, but they're not actually remitting the tax payment. And there's confusion there versus something like ADP or Gusto, where they're actually moving the money and making the payments for you. And part of our job as accountants, right, is to make sure that we're tracking the liability on the balance sheet and tying that out to something so that there isn't this huge balance that grows that the client doesn't know about until
Yeah.
they meet with their accountant at the end of the year.
So I remember the days when I think the biggest lift that ADP did for us, this is before the days of Zen Payroll. This is before the days of Gusto, right? ADP, like that's what we moved to ADP because everything was drafted. So there was no liability. You weren't the trust fund for all of the state, because we had clients that didn't even have enough money to pay their own payroll taxes. They would spend all the money. And then
Oh,
there
because it
was
was
there was
after
that
the
too.
fact.
Yeah.
What a nightmare.
It was crazy. So that's why I moved everybody to ADP because all these fucking ADP actually has pretty good controls in place. I don't even know. Like, I have no idea how Gusto runs it, but I'm pretty sure it's like ADP would lock people out of their accounts or require like a 10 grand deposit if they ever had overdraft because ADP floats the money. So everything gets deposited the next day and they float it. I mean, I'm pretty sure Gusto does the same thing. So they have like 2 day, or I could run it on like 6 p.m., 8 p.m. sometimes, and it'll hit the next day because ADP floats it as long as you do it almost before midnight. So we've taken advantage of that, but that has nothing to do with it. I think it's our fee was drafted with ADP and there were no fees on that. So that's almost how everybody was paying us too. So we were drafting our fee every time we ran a payroll. We knew the employee count, we knew all the metrics, we knew everything, and we billed them and ran it right with their payroll too. That was fun back in the
Wow.
day. Now everything's on auto draft anyway, so it don't matter. But that's what felt like auto draft. That was fun. That was our ghetto auto draft, right? But yeah, we have clients on ADP and Gusto, so I don't have any favorites on that end. So
Yeah, I feel like Gusto's done a good job of trying to be a good partner for accountants. Like you said, there's pros and cons, but for example, they recently just released their People Advisory Accelerator
mhm.
program. So myself and Josh Lance and Michael Lee and Kenji, we were
Mackenzie
we were
plus.
sort of the beta testers for that, or we would meet weekly and go through the pro. Or they were building the program and working with us on that. So that sort of got me really thinking about payroll services. So I started pushing it more after we went through that program. But I think we still have a lot more to do in terms of
Well, it's a mindset shift in how we interact with our clients. And I've tried that recently, and it really works with new clients because you set the tone and you
yeah,
establish the relationship on the right front. This is cool. And I think it's a brand new, like, bright future, right? For us to be able to really productize everything we do into different segments. And they do a really good job. But that's one person that's dedicated to it up and down, right? And so you got to be on your toes and deal with the states and figure stuff out and be able to call them and ask them. That compliance loop, that's the difficult part about anything. But I think to me right now, when I philosophize about it, it's just the reality that we live in, right? It's what we have to deal with until it gets easier. So if you know what you're going to getting into up front and you've done this before, you know how to price it. And I think that's the part that I like is we can productize all of this. And then like
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's something. One, I think it's something that we can't get away from. We have to offer it. It's something that our clients expect, and it deepens the
it's
relationship that we have with our clients.
yeah,
The second
it's
thing is
absolutely necessary.
that we've been trying to figure out because we're a small team, we have a small portfolio of clients, but it's getting bigger. And right now, multiple people on our team are doing payroll for their clients that they're managing. Where I see it going is like us having one person like you guys do, right? Where we have one person that manages everything. So if they register with the state of Washington, they know how to do that already versus Ramona goes and registers with the state of Washington. Jen goes and registers for a different client. And like we're doing all this duplication of work, or there's a weird thing
We're
in Gusto
figuring
that
it
I
out.
don't know how to do, but somebody else
We're
in the team is
figuring out
very.
the new states as we go though. Like just kind of we have one person that's willing, that's up for the challenge, right?
Yeah, and that's what we try to do is like pull out the recurring services and price those that are known, but then it's all these state issues that come up that we're trying to figure out, like, do we include that in the recurring price, or do we pull those out and say this is an additional fee because if something goes totally wrong with some state and we have to spend all this time doing it, like, are we gonna be able to recoup that? So do you guys, any new state registrations, we're gonna deal with that and it's included in this package, or do you charge an additional fee for
We
those?
charge per state, just a dollar value, like 425 or something like that,
And is
just to
that on
do
top of
each one.
actually managing payroll? That's an additional fee on top of.
Yeah, that's just always something separate. So that's always like we are a firm that's based on compliance, like on the back end. So every time there's anything compliance related, we can charge a lot for. I mean, that's a decent amount. It's not a ton, but for a client, like at least we're getting our money's worth. And whenever we do something like that, even if we have to add an employee, it's like $75 or something. So
Oh,
almost
wow,
everything we bill
okay.
for is related to that. The things that they have to do, right? That's almost been my philosophy on the back end is charge them for the shit you have to do and do everything else that you want to do that they want you to do, like somewhere in
Yeah.
the middle on a subscription. And that's where we've muddied the waters, right? We've got payroll mixed in there, we've got other things, and we have to make the waters a little clearer and uncloudy and say this is what this is. This is I'm just thinking about recent proposals, and a lot of the ones that just got accepted were people that needed shit right before the end of the year. And it's like, can you figure out how much I made this year so I know how much I should take as a salary, you know?
So are you
So
actively selling payroll services when you go through your sales calls? Are you asking about that?
we are I just kind of lately I've just been letting them dictate it, and then we just charge them for what they need ultimately, and then I think later I'll go back and clean up the mess because I think right now there's just a lot we could be leaving on the table. I got to charge some people for some onboarding that we didn't bill for. I think we just did that. But like, it's like all different things. Mostly it's just monthly contracts. I don't even know what the question was. I forgot.
Well, I think like what ends up happening for us for the clients that we don't do payroll for is that we see all these Gusto notifications coming through and we're like, you're doing it wrong. Like we have clients that we don't manage to payroll for and they're going in and signing up for ERC credits and we're looking at their financial statements and they don't
That'll be
qualify.
fun.
And so then we get
That'll
into
be fun.
Gusto and we see and we just end up seeing all these things that they're doing wrong
So,
and they
oh,
don't want to pay
wow.
for the payroll services, but what role is it for us to step in and help
Oh,
them,
so you've
right?
got a client and Gusto has made it that easy to do an ERC so they could click the buttons and say
Oh,
yes to something that might not be true.
we have
That's a
multiple
that's a real
clients.
thing now.
We have multiple clients and it just
And
ended
they've
up
gotten
like
their checks.
a lot of them got like one check and then the other ones have like one of them had $200,000 accrued because they had a huge payroll that they pay out. And so they had an ERC
Wow,
receivable
that's
on the balance
fucking
sheet that Gusto
crazy.
pushed through. And I looked at it, I'm like, what the hell is this? And so we started digging and we had two or three clients that turned it on and it just kept accruing the credit. Some of it
Oh,
got paid
man, do
out.
you think Gusto could be responsible for something like that if they're signing off on these things?
Well, I'm
Like,
thinking that if the
who's the
IRS goes
signer?
and
Like, what if the
does
IRS went after the the perpetrator? And in a lot of these cases, the client's not signing their own return. The IRS is it's easier for somebody to go after a massive amount of recurring, to get the dealer, like the head dealer who's dealing
Yeah.
to all the smaller guys, right? Like
Yeah. Well, that
that's what
yeah, go
gusto is.
after
I mean,
the
that's a
go after the dealer, not the people who are buying the drugs, right? Well, what I think is going to end up happening is the IRS is going to start auditing people, and they're gonna find out what payroll companies are shooting through ones that
who
where the
knows? We
right?
can't predict what's going to happen, and I don't think the IRS is listening to this, but they will make their own call on that, and I'm pretty sure somebody is going to be in some trouble. It's like that's when they're going to, clean up their mess too. There's a lot of money out here now.
Well, I'm wondering as part of preparing the tax return, are you or do you think other tax accountants are looking at the ERC credit?
Hell yeah, somebody wants to be the whistleblower, right? Like somebody wants to catch that shit because it's a lot.
Yeah, so that's
Hell
because
no.
I don't do taxes, so that's what I was wondering is when the tax accountants go and do the tax return, is that then on them to make sure that credit's proper, and if it's not, they have to end up owing the money back with their tax income tax return, or would it just come through? Would it just be a payroll thing?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't I
But I'm just thinking about my point is those are the clients that they didn't have us managing their payroll. But think about how many small business owners
I
out
don't
there
think
are
this is
running
Gusto's
Gusto on
fault.
their own.
I think Gusto is doing this to make it easier for their users. And they may have shot themselves in the foot,
They are,
you
yeah,
know?
but people don't understand that you have to show the 20% reduction in revenue or the 50%, and they're in order to qualify.
So
It's going to end up being the clients that are hit and saying, "Hey, you got this $100,000 ERC credit. You have to pay it back now." If they
y-
received it is going to be the problem. And so I think I guarantee you there's tons and tons of business owners that weren't working with an
everybody
advisor.
wants to claim ignorance when they know they're doing something wrong. They want to eventually say, you know what, or I didn't pay attention, right? You know you're doing something wrong. I think the person doing that ultimately probably knew they were not doing the right thing.
That's my point is going back to the fact that we aren't managing payroll, but we see these things happening. What is our responsibility to say something to them or correct a mistake that they make, whether it's the ERC or anything to their
So we have licenses and we should have some integrity. We take ethics courses. Shouldn't we, like, where do we draw the line? This is a question. This is fuzzy area, but where do we draw the line? Because we know, like, right, that they probably shouldn't have done this. You could tell them you guys should return this because you're not eligible. And would you, or do you feel like you're the bad guy if you do that?
No, that's
Or do you
exactly
not care?
that's exactly what we've done. We notified them and then they said, "Oh, that was ignorance on my part. I didn't know what I was doing." And then we went and
So you've
corrected it
got it
for
on
them.
record that you corrected it, whatever it is, you've got it on record that you stood by what they should have done and your hands are clean.
My whole point of this is that was one example, but I'm saying that there's certain clients that they don't want to pay for payroll services, but we can because we see their Gusto
Oh,
account,
that's how we went down this
we
path.
know that there are things that they do wrong, incorrectly all the time, and it's frustrating because we'll bring these things up and help them for free, but then they don't want to actually pay for payroll services. We're like, that's the point of paying for payroll services is because we do things correctly. So it just gets a little bit awkward because we don't know when we should step in versus when we just like say, well, you didn't want to buy payroll services from us, so we're just going to watch you do that thing wrong
Hmm. Yeah.
to their
Well,
benefit or not to their benefit. Anyway,
well, have you dealt with some stuff recently that you're getting off of payroll? Why is payroll on your mind?
oh yeah, the last 2 months have just we've been in payroll hell, just all the state compliance issues, just weird things happening with between, like I said, the clients that don't want to pay for it, but then people stepping in on our team to help save the day because they're doing it wrong.
So
Um,
should we or shouldn't we do payroll? Listeners, call our 1-900 number. Call our 1-900 number and tell
you
us, do you offer payroll
You
services?
know, it was really interesting. I got occasionally, I don't know if you get these, but sometimes we'll get. So I got an email, like a cold email from somebody that was looking to buy accounting firms. And they said they wanted no more, they wanted payroll to be no more than 5% of the total revenue. So out of curiosity, I
What?
responded and I said, why payroll only 5%? And he said, payroll services are very low margin. And I was really surprised by that because I disagree. I think they can be low margin, but I think that they can also be very high margin if you do them correctly.
Sure.
So, despite the
If you
fact that
price
I'm
them correctly
price them and
too.
service it correctly, right?
Yeah.
So I have, yes, lately been very frustrated with our team has been frustrated with payroll and all of the issues it's creating. But it's because it's a new service that we're providing. And so we're facing these hurdles that we're working through, right? And we're building systems around them and we're getting the right resources. We're working with a subcontractor now that will do all of the state registrations for us. So our team doesn't have to deal with that. And I think long-term we'll end up hiring a full-time person that will just do payroll services, but it's going through those bumps that is creating some issues. But I think if you use the right technology, like a service like Gusto, you can make payroll profitable. I just got an email. Michelle here, reaching out from Gusto PR and Comms team for an exciting opportunity with Accounting Today. We're in touch with a reporter who's working on a special report titled Beyond Payroll, Adding HR Services and More. The report will explore how accounting firms can get into payroll adjacent spaces like HR, consulting, benefits admin, temporary staffing, and executive search.
Oh, we were gonna do that too. I had somebody that got certified SHRM. It's what's the SHRM? The SHRM certification.
Yeah.
I called it shrimp. There's no P in there, but I used to say shrimp because I just thought it looked shrimpy. So we didn't end up doing it. But these are the kind of things that you keep seeing because we're already intimately involved with their financials. So why not be intimately involved with the rest of their back office?
Well, what I realized, so after I went through the accelerator, I got all gung ho. I was like, I'm going to build an HR services line, exactly like you said, hire someone, blah blah blah. What I realized is that payroll is very different than like in HR services. So we have a client that is an HR company, HR consulting company, and we do their payroll for them because she doesn't know how to do payroll. And then we have a client that recently hired an HR person and she didn't know how to do payroll. So we're doing payroll for them. So I'm realizing that payroll is kind of like bookkeeping and accounting.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
HR is like CFO services where people think that they're the same, but they're super
Oh,
different. And
yeah.
in my head was like, oh, HR is payroll, payroll is HR. It's completely different.
So I like your big idea. You're drawing a correlation between payroll
Yeah.
and HR, and then
And HR.
CFO advisory services over bookkeeping.
Yes, one's recurring, right, and easy to scope,
Oh,
and
I
it's the
see
base
where
level
your head's at.
foundation, and the other one is more
I see
as
where
the
your
client
head's at.
needs
Yeah.
it, more consultative. So we now have 3 clients signed up for no, we're charging I think we have 3 of them
That
signed up for
is
like
very
$1,600
good.
a month
I
for
like it.
CFO services. I don't wanna do HR services because it's the same problem where it's one-off, it's as needed, it's just big things happening. So I'm just trying to carve out everything that's recurring and build that into the recurring services. The compliance we kind of have to do, so I'm outsourcing that to a subcontractor, and then HR. We'll see. If I can figure that out one day down the road, but it's just not a right now thing because I think it's going to be hard to figure out how to get that into like a recurring revenue model rather than a one off. But it takes, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, what parts of it are repetitive? What parts of it become, that more or less routine, and then the rest of it, what's an art? Start.
yeah. I don't know. So that's what we did with accounting services over basically just carved out everything we know that happens at least once a year and said, okay, we'll offer these services. And so with HR
Yeah.
services, you could do the same thing, right? You could say like every year
Well,
you do benefits admin, every year you have to do a workers' comp audit, every year you're going to do annual reviews,
look, for the
whatever.
last
Tie back into like, should I offer payroll and HR services and how should I do that? Anything and it's included in the price, or do you want to say that's why it goes back to I think picking out the recurring services that's the known, and then the unknown having that sort of like, okay, we bill anything out of scope by the hour, but it's not going to be something that happens all the time because I have to manage capacity. I can't just have you asking for all these hourly things all the time
Mhm.
and then my team's already at full capacity and I have nobody to actually do the services for you. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, I have to realize too, before we sign off, is that I am spending way too much time doing the podcast stuff and not enough time in my email. And I got to dive back into email. So I'm going to sign off for a little bit. I might be
Checking
figuring shit out.
email.
I might be checking my email for a day or two.
Yeah.
I almost got it down to less than 100. I try to keep
Oh
my inbox
god.
to less than 50 because then I can manage it in my head.
Me
But that means I
too.
have to do a bunch of work.
Me too. Yeah, that 'cause
Do you?
well, I
What do you
try to
try to
keep
keep
it
it
at
at?
50 because
The max allowed on one page is 50?
yes, on
Yeah.
Google. And I have
Mm-hmm.
to go to the next one. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I get stressed out when I get to the bottom. I'm like, "Yes," and then I'm like, "Oh, I have 100," and I have to go write one more and do, like, double. I hate
Yep.
that.
If I can get my list down to one page, I can push it to the next day because it's one piece of paper. That's my email. I love that you do that too. Like I love to hear people's email habits now because I'm paying more attention to that. That's the only thing I got to manage right now.
Alright, we better get going here.
I'm gonna sign off for today. And this is gonna be a marathon to edit because I was high.
Have a good night. I'll see you later.
See ya.